Talk Business with Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, BCCI. Welcome as we hear the perspectives of various subject matter experts and stay up to date on the challenges and solutions around emerging and current trends in business, policies, trade, and more. In this edition of Let's Talk Business, the third annual Green and Renewable Energy Expo hosted by the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025 at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Centre brought together industry leaders, policymakers, innovators and stakeholders to discuss, strategize and propel the island's renewable energy ambitions forward. The annual Green and Renewable Energy Expo is a pivotal event for the nation's energy future as Barbados is accelerating efforts to achieve its ambitious goal of transitioning to 100% renewable energy by 2030. The Expo addressed the most pressing challenges and opportunities in the renewable energy landscape, focusing on topics that directly impact Barbados and the wider Caribbean region. Through expert panels, insightful presentations, and interactive sessions, the event fostered meaningful dialogue and actionable solutions. In this episode of Let's Talk Business with the BCCI, we share an excerpt of the opening remarks by the chair of BCCI's Green Committee, Mr. Andy Armstrong, and the keynote address delivered by Minister of Energy and Business Development, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins, who shared an update on the progress being made by government towards achieving the 2030 renewable energy goal.
Welcome to the Chamber's third Green Expo. This is one of the highlights of the Chamber's calendar and underscores our commitment to catalyzing the green revolution. This public commitment stretches back 15 years, as it has been one of our priorities since 2010. The world has come a long way in these last 15 years, and today, in 2025, we stand at a juncture where the generation of electricity from renewable sources, onshore wind, and utility-scale solar PV is the least expensive option available. Of course, as we know only too well in Barbados, once you pass a certain threshold, storage is imperative if you want to add more renewable energy to the grid. Encouragingly, in some countries and scenarios, the cost of electricity from wind and storage or solar and storage is actually still less than the cost of natural gas-fired power. So, from a dollars and cents perspective, it makes sense to move to renewable energy as soon as possible. And I think most people in the world accept that. And that is even without factoring in the health and climate reasons to do so. I just came back from 3 weeks in Vietnam, visiting my youngest son, who works for a company called EDF Renewables, and they're doing a 440 megawatt offshore wind farm off of Taiwan. He's in charge of the design of that. He's there because of his wife, but luckily he found a good job that complemented his field. But while we were there, we were based in Saigon, but we also visited Hanoi and Hoi An. And while I was there, Hanoi in the north had the dubious distinction of being the most polluted city in the world, with an air quality of over 200. Now, the air quality scale ranges from 0, usually they don't measure above 250, although I think New Delhi had over 1,000 in December. But the higher the number, the worse the air quality. Barbados, by comparison, ranges between 20 and 30, and if you're on the coast in Barbados, it can be in single digits. So it really gave me an appreciation for Barbados, and I complain about the Sahara dust sometimes, but having been in Vietnam for 3 weeks, I realized that our air quality is so much superior to theirs. And it's not only Vietnam, it's most of Southeast Asia suffers from really bad air quality. The main causes of that air pollution are exhausts from fossil fuel vehicles, coal plants, and fires for cooking or burning trash. The World Health Organization estimates that 7 million people die every year from air pollution. That is the same amount of people who died from COVID-19 from 2019 to present. It's also almost 100 times more than the amount of people who die every year from fentanyl overdoses. Of course, you know fentanyl is very much in the news now, and we're putting, well, not us, but some people are putting a lot of energy into stamping that out, which is the right thing to do. But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that air quality is one of the leading causes of death worldwide. And it's one that if we phase out the burning of fossil fuels and move all vehicles to zero emission, that'll have a positive impact on that and on world health. So, as I pointed out earlier, it makes economic sense too to move to renewables. So I'm confident that in any logical world, we will get to that stage and our children and grandchildren will enjoy a healthier, cleaner world. Of course, there are interests who don't want to see that scenario evolve in the short to medium term, but eventually we will get there. Barbados is going to get there pretty soon. 2030? I know that's our keynote speaker will address that. And I know there are whispers that maybe we won't make it all in 2030, but I'll let the minister speak to that. But regardless, Barbados has one of the most ambitious targets in the world, and I think we need to be lauded for that. So let's give ourselves a round of applause.
I am excited to be here this morning on the invitation of the Chamber. When I assumed the role of Minister of Energy in October, I believe it was October 29th of 2022, the Prime Minister hosted immediately thereafter in November a dedicated session for us to have somewhat of a stock taking on what the state of the energy industry was, and storage was the conversation at that time. In 2019, we adopted a Barbados National Energy Policy. We had a broad agenda that we set out, an ambitious agenda that the world was lauding us for, and I heard Andy make reference to it. It is perhaps the most ambitious transition target in the world. And so the world's attention began to be focused on Barbados. Everyone wanted to understand how this little country over in the Caribbean was going to achieve these targets of phasing out fossils and drawing 100% of its electricity from renewable sources. And so the journey began. And we began with an aggressive push with feed-in tariffs that were quite well incentivized to be able to get first movers into the market, and off to the races we went with heavy investments over the years in solar technology. Now, last year when I was here, I spoke about Barbadians as overachievers, and I spoke about the fact that we just can't do anything in a small way. We must always be in excess. I spoke to you last year and I said, we then found ourselves with surplus solar. We still are there. But I acknowledge, and I stand here this morning confident in the fact that because we set those ambitious targets, because we were the first country to go into that space, because we were still writing the playbook, not just for us, but for the rest of the world, there were some things that we ought to have done perhaps from as far back as 2016 when the first licenses were issued, and 2019 when the policy was implemented, and all of the times that evolved ever since then. We ought to have, at the time, matched generation licenses with storage licenses. But we weren't there, but we're there now. So we're drawing a line in the sand somewhat today in 2023 and benchmarking that against where we were in 2019 when we had the National Energy Policy. And the way forward at this point very much is storage. And I want to spend a few moments talking about what storage has meant for us and where we are with the procurement of storage. Last year, I believe in March, Prime Minister announced in her budget statement that we were going to be going to the market for competitive procurement for battery energy storage systems. As it stands, and I believe I said this last year, we knew what the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan outlined in terms of our energy mix and how much storage it projected. Those overachievers that you all are meant that we ended up having more solar than was even contemplated in the IRRP. We have far more, we probably have about 400 or 500% over what was originally mapped out in the integrated resource and the resilience plan. But we have no more storage than we have. In fact, the IRRP called for storage in the amount of 150 megawatts at the time, and we still only have 5. And so what have we done? We've now developed the Electricity Supply Act, which creates a new regulatory framework to be able to allow for us to be able to go into the 2023 version of what started in 2019. The Electricity Supply Act passed last year is imminently about to be proclaimed, and with it a series of regulations that will allow for the sector to be regulated, including new regulations on competitive procurement, which will include both generation and storage procurement. The ministry, together with the teams that I mentioned in my stakeholder engagement briefing before, have mapped out an extensive process for procurement. We have determined that the 150 megawatts of battery energy storage systems that we need to go to the market for will be prioritized, and we will do it in tranches over time. The first tranche, you have already seen the request for information, which was launched last year, closed on November 21st last year, and we now are preparing to come to the market with a full invitation for requests for proposals for the first tranche of battery energy storage systems. And when I say the first tranche, it is because the work that we have done together with REL and all of the agencies, and I want to also acknowledge NREL, they will not be speaking today, but they are very much part of the process working with us. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory is the RE section of the Department of Energy of the United States Department of Energy, and they have been working very closely with us. And in so doing, they've connected us with a similar state to Barbados, a country that is a part of a country, and is in Hawaii. It is Hawaii. And so our team, I believe the utility, has also met with their counterparts in Hawaii, and we have met with the colleagues in Hawaii. They're the only other country in the world that have done what we are doing now. And so together with them, we've had a lot of the benefit of best practice learning from Hawaii. And so we're partnering with NREL to be able to deliver the things that we're learning. Excuse me. And so coming out of that, we've made a number of determinations. If we were to go to the market for 100% of the battery energy storage systems quantum that we need now, we are still matching that with your construction of energy projects, solar projects. If we were to procure 100% of the energy systems, battery energy storage systems that we need now, and you have not yet started your construction of solar, it means that we will start with excess capacity, and with it, it will have an impact on the cost of electricity. And so we are at this time matching your construction of solar projects, which we estimate per project based on size between 6 to 9 months, with the procurement of battery energy storage systems. And so in tranches, you will see us go to the market in overlapping incarnations to be able to procure battery energy storage systems. So that is the procurement up to 150 megawatts through the end of 2025, which is underway. On a parallel track, there are those of you who want to be able to integrate batteries in your own projects. And in June of 2023, the Fair Trading Commission would have issued the EST, the Electricity Storage Tariff. And at the time, it was up to 50 megawatts. To date, there has been no uptake of that EST. It is now January of 2025. And so together with that multi-stakeholder group, and coming out of our Friday morning sprints and in the discussions there, we have worked with the Fair Trading Commission. They have now undertaken a review of the energy storage tariff of June 2023, and they have completed the development of a new guidance note, which is meant to map out where you are supposed to go into the negotiations with the utility, and it gives greater clarity that arguably was not there before. I was overseas 2 weeks ago, and I got up in the morning after devotions and read the newspaper and saw the headline. And this headline said, "Back to the drawing board." And I was a little distressed because the story bore no relationship to the headline. But it appeared to represent that there was a divergence of some kind between the ministry and the regulator, and that was the reason why the FTC was going back to the market and had started the process of public consultation on the EST. That was not so. It was an unfortunate characterization of the situation, and I want to take the opportunity this morning to clarify the record. The EST is meant to run in parallel with the battery energy storage system process. The EST was up to 50 megawatts. One of the things that was important for us was to ensure that we did not have two competing signals to the market. So the market did not know whether they should go EST or whether they should wait for the battery energy storage systems. And we needed to make sure that policy and regulation aligned. That's what government does. That's what multi-stakeholder consultation will result in. And so the determination was made that the EST therefore needed to allow for small individual independent power producers who have systems below a certain size, 1 megawatt in particular, to be able to have a tariff rate so they could get their own battery systems without having to wait for the battery energy storage system process. That process then went to the electricity panel of the FTC, and it has gone out for public consultation. I believe that it will close in another week, and we're looking forward to the decisions of the FTC. You know that I do not speak ever on matters relating to the FTC, but I take the opportunity this morning specifically to clarify that misleading information that would have sometimes perhaps created some angst in the market. So what is the EST going to do now? The EST will give you an individual rate for you to be able to get your own battery energy storage system if you want to, up to 1 megawatt. The EST will ensure, as will the battery energy storage system process, that we are not giving a single investor 100% of the battery energy storage systems either. Because under the BESS and under the EST, no single investor can have 100% of the investment. And why would we do that? One, it is important for us to ensure that we have redundancy. If we were to have one single investor with 100% of 60 megawatts, as is the first tranche to the BESS as the BESS, or with 100% of the energy storage tariff allocation, it would mean that if something went wrong with your system, we would have absolutely no redundancy in our system, and we would have no backup. And so the determination was made to spread it around, to democratize the investment for all, and to ensure that we had an opportunity to have the redundancy built in, as I've said. So the EST is running in parallel for small systems, and the BESS will go in tranches of different sizes. Now, the team has advised throughout, and others, that once we open up for the EST at the end of that process of public consultation and the decision is issued, the expectation is that the way in which the decision of January 2023 is written, it is scalable. So once your projects are finalized, or once you are heading towards COD, the expectation is that you will then have an opportunity to see a scalable EST over time. It may evolve from 50 as a pilot to then becoming, once you have the data, because Barbados has no data on storage. It does not exist. And the data is important for a range of things, including pricing. Pricing that will benefit the consumers, pricing that will allow for you as an investor to have a return on investment, but data is king in this. And so the data from the first tranche to the EST will be critical for us to make recommendations with the technical advisors on what should be the next tranche of investment. So I wanted to be clear on that. The other thing that I want to raise with you here as well is the work that has been done in mapping out what's happening in the energy system overall. As part of the battery energy storage system process, we have completed a significant body of additional work that did not exist before. And I cannot say it enough. We are writing the playbook from scratch in many ways, and perhaps in every way. Over the last year, with the support of RELT, we have completed a grid characterization study. It didn't exist before. So we now can tell you, coming out of that grid characterization study, what the entire grid from St. Lucie to Christchurch and St. Philip and everything in between looks like. We can tell you what's happening on the distribution and on the transmission networks. We can tell you where solar projects are clustered. We can tell you what the feeder systems look like, and we can tell you where, particularly on the transmission side, we need to locate battery energy storage systems. The entire grid has now been mapped, and that work has been completed by the multi-stakeholder team. We've also looked at some of the issues that have been bugbearers to you in the business community, the power purchase agreements. The power purchase agreements, there were a number of bugbearers, and we went through those bugbearers one by one by one by one. And I'm proud to take the opportunity to share with you that we have now created, one of the pressing issues was liquidation. Having a liquidity facility to make sure that there was a protection for investors in the event that there was a force majeure type issue. Under the central bank, we set out to have a discussion. And I am so proud, again, that Barbados has broken new ground. Together with the central bank, there is a tranche of resources. It's called the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Fund. Recently, you heard the governor of the central bank speaking about the MSME support and the financing coming from the Inter-American Development Bank for the MSME support. Who would have imagined that nestled within that tranche of money coming from the Inter-American Development Bank, also one of the weekly stakeholders participating in the process and supporting the Ministry of Energy, that there was a tranche of money carved out just for energy. Just for energy. And that is a liquidity support facility. And let me describe to you how it now will function. That liquidity support facility, an innovative means of supporting financing and supporting the bankability of projects, that liquidity facility is now going to be a rolling facility that in the event that the utility experiences a force majeure event, that the independent power producers can access those monies for a period of 3 months once the utility is unable to pay them. And once the utility is then able to pay them, then the utility tops back up the facility so it becomes a revolving facility, never to be depleted. That allows for IPPs to be kept whole at all times and for the utility also to be kept whole. That balance of interest. And it is to be administered by the intermediary banks through the central bank. So your financing is now the entity that you will work with, your financiers, your intermediary banks, participating banks, with the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Facility. We're launching that as well, and I want to express appreciation to the Inter-American Development Bank, their local team, their team in Washington, D.C., and the central bank for working along with our team, one, to innovate around it, two, to design and roll it out, and then also to have, through the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, those funds approved for use in this way. So grid characterization, brand new. Liquidation facility to support IPPs, brand new. We've also been able to have the benefit of an extensive legal team working on some of the more legally oriented issues that have presented themselves in the PPP. And I want to acknowledge that as part of that extended team that we have had to work with, former Chief Justice, former Attorney General of Barbados, Sir David Simmons, and Chairman of the Law Reform Commission, he has written all of the legal briefs to help us to navigate the way in which we could resolve the PPA issues that have been legal in nature, and we are now in a position to say that there is one remaining issue, I believe, in the PPA discussions, and we're working through that with the partners, and we expect that that will be completed very soon. In addition to that, we also have done groundbreaking work, and I'm not saying that just because I am the Minister of Energy. I'm saying it because we've spent time in the international community meeting with other member states of various institutions, and they're all looking to Barbados to learn from what Barbados has done. One of the other things that we have also taken the time to do is to look at the local content provisions. And many of you were expecting to see this in the Electricity Supply Act, and those local content provisions are there. But here's what is also important. We thought it was important not to be very I don't want to call it get into the minutia of what each project should do as if you were all homogeneous projects. HDF is hydrogen-driven. You are different from a solar project, and you're different from a biomass project, and you're different from an onshore wind project. You're all very different. And so the Electricity Supply Act calls for local content. It calls for local participation and requires you to register a local company, and it does require you to collaborate with a local company, but it also gives you some flexibility. We want you to develop local content plans that are specific to your project. Each project will look different. And we're looking forward to some projects having a jobs component, a research and innovation component, a youth component, an investment component. We're looking forward to the uniqueness of the projects all coming together to collaborate and to support the development of the local energy sector in Barbados. This month, February, we will also be going to the market with another new project. The long talked about, long awaited, since I don't know how long, since Adam was probably a lad. Lambert's is about to be launched. We have spent the last year, again, slaving away on Lambert's, and what started as potentially a 30-megawatt onshore wind project is now potentially being scaled up to between 50 megawatts and potentially even 60 megawatts of onshore wind. That work has been done in collaboration with the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank, and we are very grateful for their participation. We have had the wind mass up at Lambert's for the last year. The data that was collected for Lambert's was completed in the end of November, and we are now, this week, I will leave you at some point during the course of today to have a discussion with the team, Barlovento, who is the entity that mounted the wind mass. We are now working with them to continue collecting the data over time and to have a long-term relationship with them on the wind mass. And we have a second wind mass up, which we kept a little bit quiet because we wanted to be able to capture the data, but we worked with Barlovento for that as well, but we have another wind mass up in the St. George Valley. And so we expect that the same learnings that we have had from Lambert's, that we're also now going to be in a position to launch a second wind project onshore. So we haven't been twiddling our thumbs. We wanted to make sure that once we came back to the market, we had something concrete to say to you. And so we will be coming to the market. The special purpose vehicle for Lambert's the name has already been reserved. The company itself is being created to vest all of the land resources that are there. There are a number of partners who are currently involved in that process, but we have also designed another innovative mechanism to be able to empower Barbadians and Barbadian businesses and Barbadian investors. We have incorporated a unit trust model within these investments, which will allow for shares to be allocated to Barbadians in the community, to be allocated to average Barbadians who want to come together and to invest in large-scale projects, but don't have lumpy, large sums of capital. It is an empowerment mechanism, and we are very proud to be able to launch this as part of the Lambert's project. So the Lambert's project has been led, as I've indicated, with us, the transaction advisor on Lambert's is the International Financial Corporation, and we're still collaborating with them, and we will be in a position to advise once we are launching the requests for pre-qualifications of bids later this month. So one, we're about to go to the market for the first tranche of BESS, and we are about to go to the market for the pre-qualifications for wind for Lambert's. Major projects underway. On a parallel track, I've spoken also about the EST having been revised. On a parallel track, we also have a number of bodies of work going on. I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I could probably spend all day talking to you, but I know I can't do it. But on a parallel track, we also have some additional bodies of work that I want to take the opportunity to share with you. I talked about solar. I talked about wind. In the ministry, we are now in the process of developing what we call a multi-energy strategy, which allows us to look at the transition fuel for Barbados, which is natural gas, and transitioning through that in terms of dealing with the currently dirty fossils, but also how we get to onboard the renewable energy strategies over time, But then what do we do with the fact that we currently have onshore wells where we extract via BNOC, specifically natural gas and oil? I am proud to also say to you this morning that long talked about, now delivered, by April 1st, you will have the amalgamated company of the Barbados National Oil Company, the National Petroleum Corporation, and the Barbados National Terminal Company. They are finally underway to completing the amalgamation.
And that concludes Let's Talk Business with the BCCI, as we heard an excerpt of the annual Green and Renewable Energy Expo, the opening remarks by the chair of BCCI's Green Committee, Mr. Andy Armstrong, and the keynote address delivered by Minister of Energy and Business Development, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins, who shared an update on the progress being made by government towards achieving the 2030 renewable energy goal. That's it for another edition of Let's Talk Business with Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, BCCI. Join us again next time as we hear the perspectives of various subject matter experts and stay up to date on the challenges and solutions around emerging and current trends in business, policies, trade, and more.